The rain-soaked streets of New York City shimmered under the streetlights. But my heart was a storm of its own, pounding with a secret I'd carried for years. I stood outside the old diner, the neon sign flickering like my resolve, watching Ethemie childhood crush laugh with his friends inside, oblivious to me. He was still the golden boy of our small-town past, and I was still the quiet kid who'd loved him in silence. I hadn't seen Ethan in 10 years. Not since we were 17, sneaking beers behind the high school bleachers, his laughter lighting up my world. Back then, I'd been too scared to tell him how I felt, too afraid of the whispers in our conservative town. I'd left for the city, chasing dreams of art and freedom, while Ethan stayed, marrying his high school sweetheart, living the life everyone expected. But now, here he was, in my city, and the ache in my chest was as fresh as ever. The diner door swung open, and Ethan stepped out, his blonde hair catching the light, his smile still capable of unraveling me. "Elliot," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and warmth. "Is that really you?" My name on his lips felt like a time machine, pulling me back to stolen glances and unspoken words. I nodded, my throat tight, as he closed the distance between us, his hand clapping my shoulder like we were still kids. "You look different," he said, his eyes scanning my face, lingering a beat too long. I'd grown into myself since we last met, taller, leaner, with a confidence I'd fought hard to earn. But standing there, I was 17 again, my heart hammering as I tried to read the flicker in his green eyes. Was it curiosity, regret, or just the nostalgia of old friends? Before I could answer, another voice cut through the rain. "Elliot." Deep, steady, and unmistakably his. I turned, and there was Caleb, striding toward me, his dark eyes locked on mine like I was the only person in the world. My boyfriend. My anchor. The man who'd taught me what love could be. He didn't hesitate, didn't falter, even with Ethan standing there. In one fluid motion, he scooped me into his arms, lifting me off the wet pavement, his lips brushing my ear as he whispered, "He's too late now." The world slowed. Caleb's arms were strong, his warmth a shield against the rain and the weight of my past. Ethan's smile faltered, his eyes darting between us, a question forming he didn't dare ask. I clung to Caleb, my heart racing, not from fear, but from the certainty of being exactly where I belonged. Caleb set me down but kept his arm around me, a quiet claim that felt like a victory. "Who's this?" he asked, his tone light but laced with something sharper. I introduced them. "Ethan, my old friend. Caleb, my partner," and watched Ethan's face shift, a mix of surprise and something unreadable. "Good to meet you," Caleb said, his handshake firm, his smile polite but unyielding. Ethan nodded, his charm dimmed, and I saw it, the realization that the boy he'd known was gone, replaced by someone who'd built a life without him. We stood there, the three of us, caught in a moment that felt like a crossroads. Ethan started to say something about the past, about late nights and small-town dreams. But Caleb's hand tightened on my waist, grounding me. I wasn't that kid anymore, hiding in the shadows of my own heart. I was here, in the open, loved fiercely by a man who saw all of me. "Let's get out of the rain," Caleb said, his voice cutting through the tension. He led me toward the diner, his hand never leaving mine, while Ethan trailed behind, his steps slower, like he was chasing a memory he couldn't quite catch. Inside, the air was warm, the smell of coffee and grease comforting. But the real comfort was Caleb's presence, steady and unshakable. We slid into a booth. Caleb beside me, Ethan across from us. The conversation started like catching up. Small talk about jobs and lives, but there was an undercurrent, a tension that hummed between every word. Ethan talked about his divorce, his move to the city, his search for something new. His eyes kept finding mine, searching for the boy he'd known. But I wasn't that boy anymore. Caleb's knee pressed against mine under the table, a reminder of who I'd become. As Ethan spoke, I saw flashes of our past nights by the lake, his hand brushing mine as we passed a bottle. The way my heart had leapt and then broken when he'd kissed Sarah under the bleachers instead of me. I'd spent years wondering what could have been. But now, with Caleb's warmth beside me, those what-ifs felt like ghosts, fading in the light of what I had. Caleb leaned in, his voice low but clear. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, squeezing his hand under the table. He knew about Ethan every late-night confession, every tear I'd shed over a love I'd never spoken. And yet, here he was, unafraid, holding me like I was his entire world. Ethan watched us, his smile tight, and I wondered what he saw. Did he see the life I'd built, the love I'd found? Or did he see the boy who'd once looked at him like he hung the stars? The diner's jukebox kicked on, some old Springsteen song about longing and escape, and it felt like the universe was underscoring the moment. "You two seem happy," Ethan said finally, his voice softer, almost wistful. Caleb grinned, his arms sliding around my shoulders. "We are," he said, simple and sure. I felt my chest swell, pride and love mixing into something fierce. Ethan nodded, his eyes dropping to his coffee, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. The rain kept falling outside, but inside, I was warm, anchored by Caleb's touch and the life we'd carved out together. Ethan was a chapter I'd loved, but Caleb was the story I was living. And as we sat there, the past and present colliding, I knew I'd made the right choice not just tonight, but every day since I'd found the courage to be myself. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting a warm glow over the cracked vinyl booth where we sat. Caleb's arm rested casually around my shoulders, his thumb tracing small circles on my arm, a quiet reminder of his presence. Ethan sipped his coffee, his eyes flickering between us, trying to piece together the years that had stretched between the boy he'd known and the man I'd become. I caught Caleb's eye, and he winked, a flash of mischief that made my heart skip. He was always like this, bold, unapologetic, wearing his love for me like a badge of honor. Ethan, though, seemed caught off guard, his small-town charm fraying at the edges as he navigated this new reality. "So, Elliot," he said, leaning forward, "you're an artist now. I saw your name in some gallery ad. That's incredible." His words were kind, but there was a weight to them, like he was trying to bridge a gap he hadn't realized was so wide. I nodded, telling him about my painting's vibrant abstracts that poured out the emotions I'd once kept locked away. "It's my way of making sense of things," I said, glancing at Caleb. "Of finding truth." Caleb squeezed my shoulder, his pride in me as tangible as the rain still dripping outside. Ethan's smile was tight, like he was wrestling with something he couldn't say. You were always drawing in that sketchbook back in high school, he said. Guess I should have known you'd make it big. There was a wistfulness in his tone, a crack in his golden boy facade, and I wondered if he was thinking of those nights by the lake, when we'd been close enough to touch but too scared to cross that line. Caleb jumped in, his voice easy but deliberate. Elliot's got a show coming up next month. You should come. His work's got soul. He said it with a grin, but there was a challenge in his eyes, like he was daring Ethan to see the life I'd built without him. Ethan nodded, murmuring something about trying to make it, but his gaze kept drifting to Caleb's hand on my arm, to the way I leaned into his touch. The conversation shifted to Ethan's life, his divorce, the way his marriage had unraveled under the weight of expectations. I thought I had it all figured out, he said, his voice low. Wife, house, the whole American dream. But it wasn't enough. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the boy who'd once made my heart race, now searching for something he'd lost. I wanted to feel sorry for him, but Caleb's warmth beside me kept me grounded, reminding me I'd already found what I needed. The jukebox switched to a slow ballad, and Caleb stood, pulling me up with him. Dance with me, he said, not a question but a quiet command. I laughed, half embarrassed, but followed him to the small open space near the counter. Ethan watched as Caleb pulled me close, our bodies swaying to the music, his hands steady on my hips. The diner's other patrons glanced over, some smiling, some indifferent, but Caleb didn't care. He never did. He leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. You're mine, he murmured, and I felt my cheeks flush, my heart swelling with the truth of it. Ethan stayed in the booth, his coffee untouched, his eyes fixed on us. I could feel the weight of his gaze, heavy with questions he'd never ask. Did he regret the years we'd lost? Did he wonder what might have been if I'd spoken up back then? I didn't know. And for the first time, I didn't need to. Caleb's arms were my answer, his love a truth I'd spent years searching for. When the song ended, we slid back into the booth, my hand finding Caleb's under the table. Ethan tried to pick up the conversation, asking about my art, about Caleb's work as a chef, but the ease was gone. Every word felt like a step on uneven ground, the past and present clashing in ways none of us could ignore. I told him about our life, our Brooklyn apartment, the late nights cooking together, the way Caleb's laughter filled every corner of my world. Ethan listened, but his smiles were fleeting, his eyes shadowed with something unspoken. You ever miss home? Ethan asked suddenly, his voice soft, like he was reaching for a piece of the past. I thought about our town, the stifling expectations, the whispers behind closed doors, and shook my head. Home's not a place, I said, glancing at Caleb. It's a feeling. Caleb's fingers tightened around mine, and I knew he understood. He'd given me that feeling, built it with every touch, every shared dream. Ethan nodded, but his expression was distant, like he was seeing me for the first time and realizing I'd outgrown the boy he'd known. The diner started to empty, the rain slowing to a drizzle outside, and I knew this moment couldn't last. Ethan checked his watch, muttering something about an early meeting, and stood to leave. It was good seeing you, Elliot, he said, his voice catching slightly. I'm glad you're happy. I stood too, Caleb beside me, his presence a quiet strength. Take care, Ethan, I said, and I meant it. He'd been my first love, But Caleb was my forever. Ethan hesitated, like he wanted to say more, then nodded and walked out into the rain, his figure fading into the city's blur. Caleb pulled me close as the door swung shut, his lips brushing my forehead. "You okay?" he asked again, his voice soft but steady. I nodded, leaning into him, the weight of the past lifting like fog. "I'm more than okay," I said, and I meant it. The diner's neon sign flickered behind us, but the only light I needed was the one in Caleb's eyes. The days after the diner felt like waking from a dream I hadn't realized I was still having. Caleb and I walked back to our apartment through the damp streets, his hand in mine, the city alive around us. Ethan's reappearance had stirred something in minute regret, but a clarity about how far I'd come. I'd spent years imagining a moment like that night, where the past would collide with the present, but I hadn't expected to feel so free. Caleb noticed the shift in me. Over breakfast the next morning, as he slid a plate of pancakes across our tiny kitchen table, he asked, "You still thinking about him?" His tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp, always reading me better than I read myself. I shook my head, reaching for his hand. "Not like that," I said. "It's just closure. You know." Seeing him made me realize I don't need to wonder anymore. Caleb nodded, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Good," he said, his voice warm but firm. "Because I'm not sharing you." He grinned, and I laughed, the tension of the night before dissolving into the ease of our life together. We spent the day like we often did, him sketching out new recipes, me painting in the corner of our living room, the canvas catching the colors of my heart, ginger, system, emotions. Music played softly from our old radio, a quiet backdrop to the rhythm of our love. That evening, as we lay tangled together on our couch, Caleb's fingers tracing patterns on my back, I thought about what Ethan's return had meant. He'd been a spark in my youth, a flicker of what could have been, but Caleb was the fire that warmed my life. I told him as much, my voice soft against his chest, and he pulled me closer, his lips finding mine in a kiss that said everything words couldn't. The next week, I threw myself into my art, preparing for my gallery show. Caleb was there every step, helping me frame canvases, teasing me about my tortured artist vibe. But Ethan lingered in the back of my mind, not as a rival, but as a reminder of the boy I'd been scared. Silent, unsure. I wasn't that boy anymore. I was Elliot, the man who'd found love, who'd built a life where he could be himself without fear. A few days before the show, I got a text from Ethan. "Hey, can we talk? Just us." My stomach twisted, but I owed him that much, not for him, but for me. I agreed to meet at a small park near the gallery, a quiet spot with benches and blooming cherry trees. Caleb kissed me before I left, his hands framing my face. "You've got this," he said, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the meeting. Ethan was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, his hands clasped tightly. He stood as I approached, his smile hesitant but genuine. "Thanks for coming," he said. I needed to see you again." His voice was raw, and I braced myself, knowing where this might go. We walked along the path, the spring air sweet with blossoms, and he started talking about our teenage years, about the nights we'd spent dreaming of bigger lives. "I didn't know," he said finally, his voice breaking. "Back then, I didn't know how you felt." My heart clenched, but I stayed quiet, letting him speak. If I had, maybe things would have been different. I stopped walking, turning to face him. Maybe, I said, my voice steady. But I wouldn't change a thing. And I meant it. Every choice, every pain, had led me to Caleb, to the life I loved. Ethan's eyes searched mine, and I saw the regret there, the weight of years he couldn't reclaim. I'm happy, Ethan, I said. Really happy. He nodded, his jaw tight, and looked out at the trees. I'm glad, he said, though his voice carried a quiet ache. I needed to say I'm sorry. For not seeing you back then. For not being brave enough. His words hit hard, but they didn't hurt like they once would have. They were an echo of a life I'd left behind. You don't need to be sorry, I said. We were kids. We did what we could. I offered him a small smile, and he returned it, though his was tinged with loss. We sat on the bench, the one with the carved words "Love triumphs over time," and I felt the truth of it in my bones. Ethan's time had passed, but Love Me Love with Caleb had won. We parted with a hug, his arms tight around me, a goodbye to the boy I'd loved and the man I'd become. Take care, Elliot, he said, and I nodded, watching him walk away, his shoulders hunched against a wind that wasn't there. The night of my gallery show, Caleb was by my side, his suit sharp, his smile brighter than the gallery lights. My paintings hung proud on the walls, each one a piece of my heart, and he was there, cheering louder than anyone when the crowd applauded. Ethan didn't come, and I didn't expect him to. That chapter was closed. The pages turned. Later, in our apartment, Caleb pulled me into his arms, his lips brushing my ear. You're my masterpiece, he whispered, and I laughed, my heart full. The past had shaped me, but Caleb had claimed me, and in his arms, I knew I was home. The city hummed outside, but our love was the loudest song, a melody of courage, truth, and triumph.